It's a Saturday morning in late April. You're standing in your backyard in a fleece jacket because it's still cold, holding your coffee, looking at your 3-year-old apple tree. The branches are leafing out. It looks healthy, strong, like it's finally becoming a real tree. You remember planting it, the excitement, the vision of fresh apples in a few years. Except, it's been 3 years. 3 full growing seasons. 0 fruit. You tell yourself this is normal. This is just how long it takes. 5 to 7 years, right? That's what everyone says. Meanwhile, in orchards across Japan, trees planted the exact same week as yours just finished their second commercial harvest. Not a few experimental apples. Full production. 18 months from bare rootstock to revenue. They're not using magic. They're using a system you've never seen. Let's talk about what you're actually doing when you plant a fruit tree. You dig a hole. 2 feet deep, 3 feet wide. You amend the soil because the garden center guy told you to. Compost, bone meal. You nestle the tree in, backfill carefully, stake it straight, water it deeply. Then you wait. Every February, you're out there with pruning shears, cutting back last year's growth, shaping the canopy, removing crossing branches. You fertilize in April, mulch in May, water all summer, and you wait. Year 1 is establishment. The tree settles in, builds roots, gets comfortable. Fine. Year 2 is vegetative growth. The tree puts on height, fills out, starts looking like an actual tree instead of a stick. You're proud. Year 3, maybe, if you're lucky, you see blooms. A dozen flowers in spring. You get excited, take photos. But most don't set fruit, and the 2 that do drop off in June. Year 4, you get a handful. 5 or 6 apples, small but real. You taste them. Year 5, maybe half a bushel. Year 6, year 7, finally, you're getting what you call a harvest. 3 to 5 bushels, enough to make applesauce, enough to share, enough to justify the space. That's the timeline. 5 to 7 years from planting to full production. You've accepted it because the extension office says so. Your neighbor experienced it. The permaculture books confirm it. But here's what most people miss. While you're in year 3 with 0 fruit, Japanese orchards that planted the same month are finishing their second commercial harvest. Not test fruit, full yields. Export quality apples shipping to premium markets. They went from bare rootstock to revenue in 18 months. You're going from bare rootstock to revenue in, 60 to 84 months. Think about it. That's 3,000 days versus 540 days. Let's add this up. You planted in April of year 1. By April of year 6, you've invested 60 months of care. 5 annual pruning sessions. Hundreds of watering cycles. Fertilizer every spring. Pest monitoring. Mulch refreshes. And you're just now getting your first meaningful harvest. 3 bushels. Meanwhile, a Japanese orchard that planted in April of year 3 has already completed 3 full harvest cycles. 3 years of revenue. 3 seasons of technique refinement. 3 crops sold. You're 5 harvests behind. 5 entire growing seasons where they were picking and packing while you were watering and waiting for your tree to decide it was ready. Now here's where it gets interesting. This isn't about Japanese growers having secret genetics. It's not climate. It's not rootstock you can't access. It's system. They don't plant a tree and hope it figures out fruiting. They train the tree from day 1 to prioritize fruit over wood production. The methods have names: spindlebush, espalier, cordon training. These aren't magic. They're physics. Applied plant biology. Here's what's happening inside your tree right now. When you plant a young fruit tree and let it grow naturally, it allocates roughly 80% of its energy into building vertical wood. That's apical dominance. The terminal bud at the top produces auxin, a growth hormone that suppresses lateral branching and pushes everything upward. The tree is trying to get tall. Compete for light. Dominate the canopy like in a forest. That makes sense if you're surrounded by competition. It makes 0 sense in your backyard where the tree already has full sun, zero competition, consistent resources. But you let it happen because you think that's how trees grow naturally. So for 3, 4, 5 years, your tree builds a massive framework of branches you're eventually going to cut off during pruning. All that energy, all that photosynthesis, all those soil nutrients pulled up through roots, converted into wood that serves no productive purpose. This might shock you, but Japanese growers cut that terminal bud in month 1.
They force the tree to redirect energy laterally instead of vertically.
They bend branches to horizontal positions, breaking apical dominance, triggering a hormonal shift that tells the tree, stop building scaffolding, start building fruiting spurs. Your tree spends year 1 through 4 constructing vertical architecture, like literally just building height and branch structure. Then, maybe in year 5, it finally starts converting some of that structure into fruit-bearing wood. The Japanese tree skips the vertical phase almost entirely. Month 1, they prune it to knee height. Sounds brutal, right? But that forces every single bud on that shortened stem to break into lateral growth. By month 6, they've tied those lateral branches to horizontal wires at 45 to 90-degree angles. By month 12, those branches are covered in fruiting buds instead of vegetative shoots. By month 18, flowering. By month 24, commercial crop. Not because it's older,
Not because it's bigger, because 90% of its energy went into fruit development instead of framework construction.
your tree spent 5 years building structure. Their tree spent 6 months building minimum necessary structure, then switched entirely to production. You're gardening backwards, optimizing for tree size and canopy aesthetics, when what you actually want is fruit per square foot and speed to first harvest. The result is you're waiting 5 extra years to accomplish what they did in 18 months. Here's the opportunity cost nobody calculates. Those 5 extra years equal 5 harvest cycles you didn't get. If a mature tree produces 3 bushels annually and you waited 5 extra years, that's 15 bushels you never picked. At modest market prices, that's $300 to $600 in fruit you didn't grow, preserve, share, or sell. But it's not just lost fruit, it's lost time. Every weekend watering a tree, channeling energy into wood you'll eventually cut off. Fertilizing vegetative growth. Monitoring a system that's inherently slow because the design itself is slow. You can't fix this by working harder. The tree is doing exactly what you told it to do by letting it grow naturally. But time and fruit aren't the only things your slow design is costing you. Let's talk about space. Your tree sits on roughly 400 square feet of ground. That's a 20-foot diameter circle dedicated to one slowly developing asset. In a standard backyard orchard, you might fit 20 trees per acre at that spacing. If each tree takes 6 years to reach production and yields 3 bushels annually once mature, your acre generates 60 bushels per year. Eventually. That sounds reasonable until you see what Japanese high-density orchards are doing on the same acre. 300 trees. Not as some theoretical maximum, as standard commercial practice. Those trees are spaced 3 feet apart in rows, trained as narrow spindles or cordons. Each tree occupies 9 square feet instead of your 400. And because they fruit in 18 months, the entire orchard is producing by year 2. 300 trees at 2 bushels each is 600 bushels per acre. Your orchard produces 60, theirs produces 600, 10 times the yield on identical land. But here's what really matters if you're a backyard grower. You don't need 300 trees. You need to understand why their 20 trees absolutely demolish your 20 trees in production. And the answer is light. Your naturally grown tree has a vertical canopy. The top 30% gets full sun. The middle 40% gets filtered, dappled light. The bottom 30% is in shade most of the day. Fruit production follows light. So effectively, only the top third of your tree is doing productive work. The rest is structural support and partially shaded foliage. Meanwhile, a trained tree with branches held horizontal has 95% of its canopy in full sun. Every leaf photosynthesizing at maximum capacity. Every bud has the light exposure needed to develop into a fruiting spur. The Japanese aren't just getting fruit faster, they're getting more fruit per unit of tree because the entire structure is optimized for light interception. Your tree is a shaded pyramid. Theirs is a light-capturing plane. Same genetics, different geometry. Here's where it compounds. Because your tree is slow, you can't intercrop the space around it. For 5 years, that 400 square feet is locked. Because of slow design, you can't plant annual vegetables there. Because of slow design, you can't succession plant berry bushes. The space is held hostage, producing nothing, waiting for the tree to mature. In a trained high-density system, trees produce by month 18, which means the space generates return almost immediately. There's no 5-year waiting period. And because the trees are narrow and controlled, you can intercrop between rows starting in year 1. Strawberries, lettuce, herbs, stack functions. The orchard becomes a production system from day 1. Because of slow design, you're locked into a waiting game with 0 intermediate returns. Now let's talk about why Japanese growers prune in summer instead of winter. You've been taught to prune in February when the tree is dormant. That makes sense for maintenance pruning, for shaping, for removing dead wood. But it's the wrong season if you want to accelerate fruiting. When you cut a branch in February, the tree is asleep. Come April, that cut triggers a massive growth response. The tree pushes new shoots from buds near the wound. You just told it to make more wood. That's the opposite of your goal. When you prune in July, the tree is at peak energy, fully leafed, photosynthesizing hard, storing carbohydrates. When you remove a competing vertical shoot in July, the tree doesn't have time to respond with new growth. The growing season is more than half over. Instead, the energy that would have fueled that shoot gets redirected into remaining branches and stored as reserves in the roots. Those stored reserves drive bud differentiation over winter. Come spring, instead of vegetative buds, you get flower buds. Summer pruning removes future wood. Winter pruning stimulates current wood. Think about it. When you bend a branch to horizontal, you break apical dominance. The auxin hormone, which normally concentrates in the vertical terminal bud and suppresses everything else, gets redistributed along the entire length of the branch. That redistribution triggers lateral buds to differentiate into fruiting spurs instead of vegetative shoots. You're not forcing the tree. You're having a conversation with its hormone system. You're telling it, through physical positioning, that the vertical growth phase is over and reproduction can begin. The tree responds. By month 12, those horizontal branches are covered in spurs. By month 18, those spurs are flowering. Your tree is still in scaffolding mode. But here's the reality most people miss. This isn't some modern industrial hack. Humans have been training fruit trees for 4,000 years. The Romans grew espaliered apples against villa walls. Medieval monasteries had entire orchards of cordon-trained pears for the refectory. Japanese growers refined these methods over centuries of observation, watching how trees respond to different cuts, learning the biology through practice. The idea that letting a tree grow naturally is somehow more respectful or aligned with nature is mythology. A wild apple tree in a forest takes 10 to 15 years to fruit, sometimes longer. Because in nature, that tree is competing. It has to get tall before it reproduces, or it gets shaded out. In your yard, there's no competition. Full sun, no predators, consistent water, fertile amended soil. Letting it waste 5 years building unnecessary height isn't honoring nature. It's ignoring context. The Japanese approach isn't domination. It's observation translated into action. They're not forcing the tree to do something unnatural. They're removing the competitive constraints that made sense in a wild ecosystem, but make 0 sense in a managed garden. You're not fighting the tree when you train it. You're speaking its language. You're saying, through July pruning and horizontal positioning, you're safe, you have abundant resources, you can fruit now. And the tree listens. Here's how you actually implement this without becoming a full-time orchardist. First, choose your rootstock. For apples, M9 or M26. These are dwarf rootstocks that naturally cap tree size at 8 to 10 feet. For cherries, Gisela 5. For pears, OHXF 87. The rootstock determines mature height and how aggressively the tree wants to grow. You're not trying to grow a 30-foot monument. You're trying to grow a controlled production system that fits in a backyard. Dwarf rootstock gets you there. Next, pick your training system based on available space. If you've got a fence line or a south-facing wall, espalier. That's training the tree flat against a two-dimensional plane. Branches grow horizontally left and right, but not forward or backward. Perfect for tight urban spaces. If you've got open yard space, spindlebush. That's a central leader with horizontal branches radiating out like a narrow Christmas tree. 3 to 4 feet wide maximum. Easiest system for beginners.
If you want maximum density, cordon.
Single-stem trees planted at 30-degree angles, fruiting along the entire trunk. You can space them 18 inches apart. Pick one. Now let's talk about year 1, because this is where the actual work happens. You plant in early spring. Bare root is fine. Container stock works too. The moment it's in the ground, you prune it to knee height. I know, you just spent $40 on a 5-foot tree, and I'm telling you to cut it down to 18 inches. But here's what happens next. Every bud on that shortened stem will break into lateral growth. By June, you'll have 8 to 12 branches growing outward. That's your fruiting framework. In July, you select the strongest 4 to 6 branches and tie them to bamboo stakes or horizontal wires at 45-degree angles. You remove any shoots growing vertically. Those are wood shoots. You don't want wood. You want fruit. By August, those tied branches are setting next year's buds. That's it.
6 pruning and training sessions of roughly 2 hours each, 12 hours total.
Compare that to 60 months of passive waiting. Here's where people push back. They say, this sounds too complicated. Compared to what? Compared to planting a tree and hoping it figures things out? You're already pruning every winter. You're already spending weekends maintaining it. The difference is, with training, your effort is front-loaded and purposeful. 12 hours in year 1 creates a self-regulating structure that produces for 20 years. Without training, you're spending 12 hours per year maintaining slow vegetative growth. 1 year of focused effort versus 5 years of scattered maintenance. Or they say, I don't have time for this. But you have time to wait 5 years? Because that's what you're spending right now. Time. Waiting time is still time. It's just time where nothing productive happens. Training time is active, compressed, and then it's over.
By year 2, the tree regulates itself. You prune once in midsummer to remove competing shoots, maybe an hour.
By year 3, maintenance is minimal. You don't need to overhaul your entire orchard. Start with 1 tree. Buy 1 dwarf rootstock apple tree this spring. Choose the spindle system because it's the most forgiving. Follow the year 1 protocol exactly. Prune to knee height at planting. Tie branches horizontal in July. Remove verticals in August. Then watch what happens. By spring of year 2, that tree will be covered in flower buds. By fall of year 2, you'll harvest actual fruit. Not a full commercial crop, but real apples you can eat and share. Meanwhile, your standard tree planted the same spring will still be building wood structure. You'll have proof, not theory. Your yard, your tree, your timeline compressed to 18 months. The tools are minimal. Bypass pruning shears, $15. Bamboo stakes or wire for horizontal support, $10.
Soft plant ties or cut up old t-shirts, $5. Maybe a small folding saw for the initial knee height cut, $10. $40 total. You spent more than that on fertilizer for a tree that hasn't produced anything yet. This isn't an expensive system, it's a precise system, and precision doesn't require money, it requires attention. Your neighbor is going to comment. He's going to walk over one Saturday while you're tying branches and ask why your tree looks so weird, why you cut it so short, why the branches are at strange angles instead of growing naturally. You're going to smile. You'll say something vague about trying a new technique. He'll shake his head. Maybe make a comment about how his tree is doing fine growing the normal way. And you'll let it go. Because in 18 months, you'll be picking apples from that weird-looking tree, while his conventionally grown tree, planted the same year,
is still waiting to fruit.
That's when he stops commenting on how weird it looks. That's when he starts asking how you did it. He'll see you out there with the basket. He'll see the apples, real ones. He'll look at his tree, same age, 0 fruit, and he'll want to know what you know. That's not cheating nature. That's working with it. Understanding what the tree actually needs and providing exactly that. Guided acceleration versus passive hoping. Active design versus reactive waiting. You're not a better gardener because you waited longer. You're a better gardener because you built a system that returned time instead of consuming it. Real mastery isn't patience, it's efficiency. And efficiency means you're harvesting in year 2 while the old method is stuck in establishment phase waiting for the tree to decide it's ready. Picture this. It's fall of year 2. You're standing under your trained spindle tree with a basket. You're picking apples, real ones, 30 or 40 fruit. Not a massive harvest, but enough to make a pie, enough to share with neighbors, enough to prove the system works. Your other tree, planted using the old method, same age, is standing 20 feet away with 0 fruit, a nice-looking wood structure that isn't producing anything. You look at both trees, same age, different methods, different results. One is giving you food, one is giving you patience practice. And you know, standing there with apples in your hand, that you'll never go back to the old way. Because time is the one resource you can't buy more of, and a system that gives time back is worth more than any harvest.